I once believed I was living a successful life, at least by the world's standards. I had a stable job at a large company, a decent income, a house, a car, and weekend parties with friends. I thought my family was my safe haven. I didn't think I needed God or anything else beyond what I already had. I was confident in my abilities. Everything was planned out, and I believed I was in control. Until one day, the bricks of that perfect life began to crumble. First came my job. The company I worked for suddenly laid off staff after a restructuring. My name was on the list of those being let go. The first feeling was shock, then anger, then shame. I didn't know what to say to my wife and children, to my parents, who had always seen me as the pride of the family. I started frantically searching for another job, but it wasn't as easy as I thought. The job market was frozen, and my age, over 30, no longer seemed like an advantage. Then came the financial struggles. Without a monthly salary, I started selling things I once took pride in. The first car I bought with my bonus was listed for sale with just a few clicks. Then my savings were depleted. Bills started piling up. I felt like I was being swept away by a torrent, unable to hold on to anything. But the worst part wasn't losing money. It was losing someone. My wife, the person who once held my hand and promised to weather the storms together, began to grow distant. She didn't say much, just sighed more often. One day, after a heated argument over money, she quietly packed her things and took our child back to her mother's house. "I need time to think," she said. I stood frozen in the now half-empty house. At that moment, I had nothing left. Job, gone. My possessions, gone. My family, broken. My friends were all busy with their own lives, and no one could really sit down and listen to me pour out everything that was eating away at me. I remember one night sitting alone in the dark living room with no electricity because we hadn't paid the bill, and all I could do was remain silent. I had no strength left to cry and no words to ask for help. During those days, I didn't think about God. I didn't know what prayer was. I didn't grow up in a church. But a phrase from a friend from long ago echoed in my mind. Sometimes He allows everything to be taken away so that we can meet Him. At the time, I didn't understand, but I began to ask questions. Was I being punished? Was it all just random? Or was someone really trying to call me when I had nothing left? In the days following the shock, I still had the motivation to struggle. I tried updating my resume, calling old contacts, knocking on every door for the smallest opportunity. But gradually, everything became hopeless. Emails went unanswered. Promises of "I'll get back to you" faded into silence. No one came to save me. I began waking up each morning with no reason to get out of bed. There was no sound of children chattering in the house, no sound of coffee dripping in the kitchen, prepared by my wife. The house was empty and cold, as if all life had been sucked out of it. There were days when I didn't eat anything, not because there was nothing to eat, but because I no longer felt hungry. I sat silently on the sofa, staring into the void. Time seemed frozen. There were no plans anymore. No goals, no schedule, no one expecting anything from me. I, once so busy, once proud of always having something important to do, was now completely empty. And then the question began to echo. What am I living for? No money to strive for, no one to care for, no one needs me anymore. I used to think life was a race, just keep trying, keep succeeding, keep moving forward. But when the race disappeared, I realized I didn't know where to go. All the values I had clung to, fame, status, the respect of others, vanished like smoke. One night, I sat on the living room floor surrounded by unpacked boxes and piles of bills. It was raining, and water dripped through the window. I remember asking myself, if I disappeared right now, would anyone really notice? There was no answer. I didn't tell anyone about this. I still sent messages to my friends, still replied "I'm fine" when someone asked how I was. But the truth was, inside me, there was complete ruin. Not just on the outside, but on the inside. The person I thought I was, strong, confident, in control, had collapsed. But strangely, amid the ruins, I began to see a new space. Not a scary void, but a kind of quiet space. As if all the noise of the world had been silenced so I could hear something else. As if, when all the temporary things were taken away, something real could begin. I didn't hear God's voice clearly. I didn't read the Bible or pray. But for the first time in years, I was silent. And in that silence, another question arose. Not from me, but as if from a place farther, deeper. If everything is taken away, what do I have left? I didn't know, but I began to realize maybe losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to me. At first, when the incident happened, my phone was still ringing. Friends, colleagues, and acquaintances sent messages asking, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" I knew they meant well, but gradually the messages became fewer. It wasn't because they hated me, but because they didn't know what to say anymore. And I didn't know how to respond honestly without making the atmosphere heavy. Some people withdrew gently, stopping texting and calling. Others remained polite, occasionally liking or emojing my posts. But I knew the distance had formed. It wasn't anyone's fault. It was just that people didn't know what to do with someone who had lost everything. I remember once I tried calling a close friend just to chat. He answered, his voice hesitant. And after a few greetings, he quickly said, "Sorry, I have to go. I'll call you back later." He answered, his voice hesitant. And after a few greetings, he quickly said, "Sorry, I have to go. I'll call you back later." And of course, that later never came. That time I smiled sadly and hung up. I wasn't angry with him. I just realized one simple thing. I was truly alone. I used to have a large circle of friends, family, and work connections. Now everything has shrunk down to just me. Alone in my old room, with a phone that never rings, an empty inbox, and simple meals I cook for myself. No one invites me to their birthday parties. No one asks me out for coffee, and there are no late-night conversations about dreams and future plans. Some evenings I walk alone through the dark streets, just to hear my footsteps echoing through the city. I see people laughing inside restaurants, couples holding hands, groups of friends gathering, and I feel like I no longer belong to that world. Loneliness isn't just having no one around. It's feeling like you don't matter to anyone. That if you disappeared, the world would keep turning as if you had never existed. But in the midst of that loneliness, something began to happen. I had no one to call, so I started talking to God, not with standard prayers, just questions in my mind. Can you see me? Does anyone really care about me? If I disappear, will you remember me? I didn't hear an answer, but for the first time I began to speak to the one I had thought was so far away. When there was no one left to call, I began to turn my heart upward, not because I was spiritual, but because I had no other choice. Gradually, I found myself telling God about the little things. Today I was sad because no one asked about me. Today I felt invisible in a crowd. I began to sense His presence, not clearly, but like a gentle warmth in a cold room. No one entered that room except Him. I realized there are places in the heart where only God can enter. And I was there at the very end of loneliness to meet Him, the one who never turns His back on me when I fail, who is never too busy when I call, who never leaves me alone in emptiness. There I began to know I could lose everything. But if I still had God, I still had everything. I thought about death, not because I hated living, but because living seemed meaningless. I don't know exactly when that thought appeared in my mind. The idea that maybe I should end it all. It came gently, without noise or drama. It was like a door opening in a room that had not been visited for a long time. I did not hate life. I was not the type of person who wanted to destroy everything in a fit of rage. I just felt tired. Tired of waking up every morning to face an empty day. Tired of no one expecting anything from me, of no one needing me. Tired of having no future to look forward to. My life, once busy and full of hope, is now just silent mornings, afternoons with nowhere to go, and long, sleepless nights. I remember one night I sat on the balcony of my small rented room, looking down at the twinkling streetlights below. Across the street, the sound of people laughing and talking drifted up from a coffee shop, and I was alone with the darkness and my nameless thoughts. I didn't cry, I just sighed and thought, what's the point of living? I wasn't the only one who had ever asked that question, but when I faced it myself, all reason fell silent. At that moment, I don't remember what I said to God. Maybe it was just a sigh. Maybe it was a whisper in my head. If you are real, please give me a reason to go on. I didn't expect anything. No miracle, no thunder, no light from the sky. Just silence. But strangely, in that silence, I didn't feel abandoned. I don't know why, but just as I was ready to let go, something like an invisible arm wrapped around my heart. It was gentle, but it was enough to keep me from jumping, enough to keep me from taking another wrong step. The next morning I woke up. Nothing had changed. My situation was the same, but I realized something. I hadn't ended my life, and that, to me at the time, was a victory. I started writing a diary, writing random stories, writing down my sadness, my anger, my disappointment, and the questions I didn't dare to ask out loud. Gradually, the pages became a place where I poured out my heart. And among those lines, there were places where I didn't understand why I wrote things like, I still believe you are here, or I don't see a way out, but I'm not giving up. I didn't write those words because I was strong. In fact, I was too weak to lift myself up. But deep down, a voice whispered, don't give up. You haven't finished the journey yet. And I clung to that, like a drowning person clinging to a piece of driftwood. Not because I knew it would bring me to shore, but because I didn't want to die without knowing if God could save me. I gradually came to understand that faith is not always a powerful emotion. Sometimes, faith is simply waking up one more day when you don't want to live anymore. And I did that, day after day. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't exciting. It was just one small step at a time. But in each step, He was there. No one around me knew how close I had come to the edge. No one saw the struggle within me between life and death. But God saw, and He held me back. If you ask me, why didn't I give up? I don't have a grand answer. I just know because He was still there. I have never been a diligent prayer. In the past, my prayers were mostly about work, health, plans that needed to succeed, relationships that needed to be maintained. I prayed like a businessman negotiating with a powerful being. Something like, I promise if you help me with this, I will do that. But on the day I lost everything, my reputation, my money, my friends, and my hope, my prayers fell away. I had no strength left to utter fancy words. I had no inspiration to argue with a God I wasn't sure I even believed in anymore. At that moment, I just sat in my shabby room, the dim yellow light of the bulb flickering, the sound of cars on the street like distant echoes. I buried my head in my pillow, unable to cry, unable to complain. Only a short sentence came out of my mouth. If you are real, please do something. I have nothing left. I didn't expect God to appear. I didn't expect the walls to shake or angels to appear. I just spoke, like someone about to drown, reaching up to the surface one last time. And surprisingly, I felt something. It wasn't a voice from above. It wasn't an illusion. It was just a strange silence. It wasn't heavy like before. It was as if someone was in the room. I couldn't see or touch them, but they were real. I looked up. The room was the same, but something inside me had shifted. It was subtle, but clear. I suddenly remembered the story of the woman with the issue of blood in the Bible. She only touched the hem of Jesus' garment and was healed. At that moment, I was just like her. I didn't expect Him to look at me. I just hoped to touch the hem of His garment. I had lost everything. And in that loss, I uttered the most sincere prayer of my life. No frills, no pretenses, no expectations, just a cry of desperation. But it seemed that this was the prayer God had been waiting for from me all along. I don't know where you are on your journey. Maybe you still have a lot to hold on to. Perhaps you are also losing everything. But if you have ever reached the end, where there is nothing left to protect, where there is only you in the darkness, try uttering a word. No need for a formula. No need to memorize. No need to speak loudly. Just be real, because faith sometimes does not begin with understanding, but with a trembling, imperfect prayer, but one that is sincere. I prayed not because I was strong, but because I had nothing left to lose. And strangely enough, when I lost everything, I began to find Him. I received an unexpected call from an old friend and was invited to a prayer group. I didn't believe it, but I went anyway. After that week prayer, I didn't expect a miracle. I just went back to my quiet, heavy life as usual. But something had changed, something small. I no longer felt completely alone. It was during those dark days that my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I was about to ignore it. I hadn't felt like talking to anyone in a long time. But for some reason, I picked up. "Hi, do you remember me? It's Thao, your high school friend." The voice was gentle, slightly hesitant. I was silent for a few seconds. That's right, Thao. She used to share about God when we were in school. She was cute, reserved, and had a strange faith. We used to be close friends, but lost touch after college. "I've been thinking about you for the past few days. I don't know why, so I decided to give you a call." I smiled softly. In my head, I was thinking, God? Did he do that? Thao didn't ask much. She just said, "We have a small group that meets every week to pray. You can come just to hang out. You don't have to believe, just be there." I smiled faintly. When did I start needing these prayer groups? I used to think they were weak, only for people clinging to illusions when they had nothing left. But who am I now? I have nothing left. So I nodded, not because I believed, but because I didn't know where else to go. That night, I stepped into the small room where the prayer group met for the first time. The yellow lights were soft. There were no loud sermons, no grand hymns. Just a few people sitting around a round table, sharing, reading the Bible, then praying. I felt confused, even uncomfortable at first. But then, I noticed something strange. A woman was crying, but not in despair. A man shared that he had lost his job, but still believed God had a plan. A young woman spoke of her painful past, but her eyes shone with hope. I sat silently, saying nothing. But inside, something began to melt, a layer of armor, a piece of ice. I didn't believe God had arranged this. But if not him, then who and why? Did I feel safe here, among strangers who carried a light I couldn't explain? That week, I started coming back. I didn't speak or pray aloud, just listened quietly. One day, Thao said, "You don't have to understand everything. Just open your heart a little. God doesn't expect perfection, just sincerity." I sat there silently. Those words tore open a dark place inside me. I had spent so many years trying to appear strong, independent, not needing anyone, not even God. But now in the darkness of my life, a small light like an invitation to a prayer group was enough to turn me around. Faith doesn't always come like thunder. Sometimes it starts with a call, an invitation, a small light in the darkness. I haven't said I believe yet, but I'm starting to want to believe. And with God, sometimes that's enough for a miracle to begin. As the worship songs rang out, I didn't understand everything, but my heart broke, as if God was saying, "I see you." Friday night, I went to the small group again, this time not out of politeness, but because I truly wanted to. No one pressured me to believe. No one tried to save me with moralistic sermons. They simply lived and shared a faith I had never seen before. A faith that was not loud or pushy, but sincere and peaceful. That night, they played a worship song. I sat there head down, trying to keep a straight face, as always. But something in the lyrics began to stir me. Though mountains may move and seas may part, his love remains the same. Though I may wander for a lifetime, he will wait and love me still. I didn't understand everything. Words like God's love, forgiveness, and he is there were still foreign to someone like me. Someone who thought I could handle everything on my own. Someone who believed religion was for the weak. But for some reason, my heart began to tremble. It was as if each line of the song touched the deepest parts of me, where I hid my disappointment and bitterness and the feeling of uselessness of a complete failure. I bowed my head, not to hide, but because tears had begun to fall. I tried to hold back, but I couldn't stop them anymore. And then I cried, like a child. I don't remember how long I cried. I only remember someone gently placing their hand on my shoulder. No words were spoken, no advice was given, just a silent presence beside me, like the presence of God. A phrase echoed in my heart. No one said it, but it was as clear as a voice calling out, I see you. I have never taken my eyes off you. I cried because I couldn't understand why I was being seen. Loved, when I had nothing left, when I was nothing. I used to think that I had to live a good life, be successful, and do something to be worthy of God, if He really existed. But that night, when I had nothing to boast about, only red, swollen eyes and a broken heart, He touched me again. I didn't see light from heaven. There was no voice from heaven, but something changed forever. I was no longer someone who came to church just to try it out. I began to long to know the one who melted my heart with a song, not because I wanted to be healed of my losses, but because I realized I needed to be embraced before I could be repaired. And in His arms, I began to know that I didn't have to be strong anymore. I was a person who had lost everything. But that night, I found something greater than anything I had ever had. A love that didn't condemn, but comforted. I cried like a child, and for the first time in a long time, I felt accepted as a child. I was still poor, still unemployed, still lost, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't abandoned. After that prayer meeting, I thought my life would start to turn around. I expected God to open a big door, maybe a new job, or an unexpected financial windfall. I had cried, I had repented, I had returned to God. Now it was His turn to do the rest, right? But then, nothing happened. I was still unemployed. The money in my account was dwindling. The landlord was still demanding rent. My friends were still silent. And my prayers still unanswered, at least not in the way I had hoped. I began to get angry, not as fiercely as before, but it simmered beneath the surface. A part of me thought, maybe I was deluding myself. Maybe it was all just emotions. But strangely enough, I couldn't deny what I had felt. The peace from that day still lingered in my heart. And in the midst of the emptiness, I opened the Bible again. This time, I wasn't looking for a magic phrase to solve my problems. I just read, like a child listening to their father. I came across this verse in Matthew, "Do not worry, saying, 'What shall we eat?' Or 'What shall we drink?' Or 'What shall we wear?' For your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things." I paused for a long time at the words, "Your heavenly Father knows." Not God will shower money down. Not all problems will disappear. Just simply, Father knows. I look back at my life. Though there were no financial miracles, something had changed. I began to notice the small things around me. A friend brought me a bag of rice, just when I had no money to buy food. A sister in my prayer group quietly sent some support. Not much, but enough to pay the overdue rent. One rainy day, I was feeling down when I heard a song playing in a coffee shop near my house. His Eye is on the Sparrow, and I cried. No Hollywood-style miracles, but every time I needed Him, God was there in a very gentle, very real way. I began to understand. God doesn't answer the way I want Him to. He answers the way I really need Him to. I needed more than money. I needed to know that I wasn't forgotten. I needed love, something no one could buy or give me except Him. And He gave me that love, not when I was rich, but when I had nothing. I am still poor, but I am no longer hopeless. I am still unemployed, but I am no longer lost. I still have losses, but I no longer see myself as abandoned, because now I know I am not abandoned. You are there, and I belong to you. I am helped by small things, a meal, a note. I am beginning to believe that you are taking care of me in a different way. There was a time in my journey when the little things became more precious than ever. I used to be someone who didn't notice casual inquiries or a piece of cake placed on the table. Because when you have everything, it's easy to take kind gestures for granted. But when you lose everything, even the smallest things can make you cry. That day, I had only a few thousand dong left in my pocket. I planned to wait until tomorrow, but my hunger made me dizzy. I passed by the house of a sister in my prayer group. I didn't dare knock on the door. I just walked by, hoping someone would see me. Just as I was about to turn onto another street, the door opened. She called out, "Have you eaten yet?" I forced a smile and shook my head. No, but it's okay. She pointed to the small table where there was a bowl of steaming rice and a piece of fried fish. I just finished cooking. Eat with me. I couldn't say anything. I just sat down, nodded, and tears fell silently. After the meal, I returned to my quiet room. That night, I prayed in a whisper. God, I know that wasn't just rice. It was you. You were taking care of me. And then, it didn't just happen once. One morning, I received a message from a friend I hadn't been in touch with for a long time. I don't know why, but I woke up this morning thinking about you. Are you okay? I was speechless. In that moment, I knew God was whispering to me through each person. I remember you. I used to be called names that made me proud. Boss, young entrepreneur, successful person. My business card clearly printed a title that many people dreamed of, and I believed that was my identity. But when everything was taken away, money, work, status, relationships, I suddenly felt invisible. No one remembered me. No one needed me. One morning, looking in the mirror, I exclaimed, "Who am I?" I felt as though I had no name, no role, and the most painful part was that I had nothing to be proud of, nothing to prove that I deserved to exist. It was then that someone in the prayer group gave me a Bible verse. "You are my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." At first, it felt foreign. How could I, a failure, abandoned, empty, be beloved? I remember the first time I called God Father. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't rehearsed. It was just a sigh. "Father, I'm so tired." And in that moment, I felt something very deep. I was no longer who I used to be. I belonged to someone. I didn't need fame to be accepted by Him. I didn't need achievements to be loved by Him. I was loved simply because I was His child. One afternoon, as I walked aimlessly through the old neighborhood where I used to be somebody, I realized I had nothing that made me stand out. But I didn't feel hurt anymore. Because in my heart, I knew, I have called you by name. You belong to me. After prayer meetings, I often stayed behind. Not because I was particularly eager, but because I didn't know where to go. My house was empty, I had no job, and my life seemed forgotten. One day, an older woman in the group came up to me and said gently, "Can you help me set up the chairs?" I hesitated. I had never done such menial work before. But I nodded, setting up chairs, pouring water, mopping the floor. No one clapped, no one acknowledged me. But strangely, I felt my heart warm again. The next day, I joined a few others in the group to distribute food to the homeless. I saw the weathered faces and realized they were like me, people discarded by life, people who once had, once dreamed, once lived. I handed out food, but they gave me more. A grateful look, a firm handshake, a word, "Thank you, God bless you." For the first time after days of collapse, I felt useful. Not because I was good, but because I could give, even if it was just a smile. Once I shared my story with a man huddled on the sidewalk. I told him I once had everything, then lost it all. He looked at me unblinking. Then he said, "Thank you. I thought I was the only one who had failed." I realized that pain, when brought into the light, can become a source of comfort. Not because I had overcome it, but because I was walking through the darkness with them. I began to be invited to help with logistics for a prayer group. I taught children on Sundays. I called new believers to check on them. At first, I felt awkward. "Lord, I'm still broken. Why are you using me?" But then I remembered what Paul wrote, "When I am weak, that is when I am strong." I didn't wait until I was fine to start serving. I served while I was still hurting. During times of intercession, I was also crying for myself. While supporting others, I was also fighting doubt. But in serving, God healed me from the inside. Not with fanfare, not with dazzling miracles. Just day by day, step by step. Cleaning the house, making phone calls, sharing a meal, holding the hand of someone who was crying. And I realized I no longer felt empty like before. When I stopped living for myself, I truly began to live. I didn't wait to be healed to serve. It was through serving that God began to heal me. Unbound by expectations, money, or the gaze of others, I was free to live for God, no longer afraid. There are mornings when I wake up open my eyes, look at the ceiling, and smile gently. It's not because circumstances have changed. I still don't have a stable job, a house, a car, or a brilliant career. But there was one thing I realized. I was no longer bound. I was free. Before I lived like a person in chains of reputation. I had to maintain the appearance of success. Chains of money, I had to have more, never lacking. Chains of others' opinions, I had to please them. Every day felt like running in a race with no finish line. But then, when everything faded away, my career, my possessions, even the respect of those around me, I faced myself, a naked, vulnerable person with nothing to be proud of. And in that moment, I discovered a kind of freedom I had never experienced before. I no longer have to prove anything to anyone. I don't have to live up to expectations or keep up appearances. I can say I'm not okay without fear of judgment. I can laugh loudly, cry freely, and share my beliefs without holding back. I could do what was right, even if no one noticed, because I knew I wasn't living for people. I was living for the one who sees my heart. I started walking more, not because I didn't have a car, but because I saw how beautiful nature was. I eat simply, not because I don't have money, but because my heart is full. I meet poor people, not to help them, but to walk alongside them. I pray not to be given, but to be close to my Father. One day someone asked me, "What are you going to do with your future? Aren't you afraid?" I smiled and said, "I used to be afraid, but now I have lost everything, so I have nothing left to lose. I have only one thing left, to live for the one I love." It is not recklessness, but letting go in peace. I remember the words of Jesus, "Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it." Before I tried to hold on, so I lost myself. Now I have lost, so I have found true life. Freedom is not having everything. Freedom is when nothing binds your heart. Only the love of God motivates you to live. And in that freedom, I began to fly, even though my feet were still walking on the ground. I still remember that morning. The phone rang. A gentle voice said, "You can start working next week. The pay isn't high and the work is simple. But if you're willing, we really need someone honest like you." I was speechless, not because I was excited, but because I was stunned. A door had opened. After so many days of being shut tight, it wasn't the job I had always dreamed of, not a managerial position, not a glamorous environment, just an entry-level role at a small workshop, manual labor, enough to get by. Before I would have dismissed it immediately, but now I saw that job as a gift, not because it was grand, but because it came at a time when I had nothing left. In the early days, I cleaned the floors, carried goods, and ran around. I was sweating and my back was sore, but my heart was light. There was no pressure to prove myself. There was no desire to be better than others. I worked as if I were serving the Lord Himself. I began to realize doing small things with a big heart, that is what God seeks. I remember the story Jesus told about the faithful servant. "You have been faithful in small things. I will entrust you with greater things." It is not our position that defines us. It is our faithfulness in every small thing, even when no one notices. Some days I just mopped the same corner of the floor all afternoon. Some days I just stood in a hot warehouse. But in those moments, I felt like I was learning the lessons of life: faithfulness, humility, gratitude. A coworker said to me, "You're strange. Everyone else complains about being tired, but you just smile. Your salary is low, yet you work hard. Do you have a secret?" I smiled, didn't preach, didn't pressure, just said, "I once lost everything. Now I have something again. I am grateful. I don't work to be seen. I work because there is someone who always sees me." Not everyone understood, but gradually a few people began to ask me about my faith. Not because I preached, but because they saw something different, a light, not from me, but from the one in me. God didn't open a fancy door for me. He opened a small opportunity for me to learn big lessons. That life doesn't need to be glamorous to have value. That work doesn't need fame to have meaning. That when you do everything as if you were doing it for God, everything becomes glorious. Life didn't become perfect. I still have debts and worries, but I have a peace in my heart that I never knew before. I used to think if I had a stable job, savings, and a nice house, I would be at peace. But when I had all those things, I lived in anxiety, afraid of losing them. And when I lost everything, I found true peace. Paradoxical? No, it's the truth. A truth that can only be understood when you've hit rock bottom. My life right now is far from perfect. I still have debts. Living expenses still cause me to frown every month. I haven't regained what I lost, my job, my relationships, my career. But the strange thing is, I'm not panicking anymore. I'm not running away anymore. I am at peace. That peace does not come from circumstances. It comes from a God who does not change in the midst of circumstances. I remember the words of Jesus in John, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives." Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid. The world offers peace by removing problems. God gives peace in the midst of the storm. There are nights when I still lie awake worrying about the future. There are times when I want to cry when I see the bills piling up. But deep down, there is a whisper. I am with you. Do not be afraid. And I breathe easier and I smile. Not because I am strong, but because I am relying on the one who is strong. My friends ask, how can you still smile at a time like this? I can only answer honestly, because I know I am no longer alone. The difference is not in the bank account. It lies in who is walking alongside you. Before, I didn't believe peace was real without all the right conditions. But now I experience what the Bible calls peace that surpasses all understanding. It's inexplicable, it's illogical, but it's real, it's alive, and it's deeper than any fleeting emotion. I no longer demand that God change my circumstances immediately. I simply ask Him to change my heart, to make me steadfast in my circumstances. And He has done so, little by little. In the midst of lack, I learned to find sufficiency in Him. In the midst of uncertainty, I learned to trust that each day is enough for itself. In the midst of failure, I learned to see His grace still covering me. Peace is not the absence of storms. Peace is having God in the boat with me. Even when the water's pouring in, even when the storm hasn't stopped, He is still there. And as long as He is there, I need nothing more. What seemed like the end turned out to be the beginning. When everything left me, He stepped in, and I knew I needed nothing more. I used to have many things: a prestigious job, a full bank account, a network of relationships that made me proud. I used to think that was the sign of a blessed life. Then one by one, they left me, and I thought God had left me too. But in reality, that was when He was closest to me, not with a loud noise, not with thunder and lightning or miracles, but gently, through a phone call, through a worship song, through people who quietly loved me. I lost everything I thought was the foundation of my life, and I realized He was the foundation. I remember the early days when I was left with nothing but two empty hands and a choked whisper, "If you are real, please do something." He didn't immediately change my circumstances, but He changed me. From someone living in pride, I became someone living in dependence on His grace. From someone who only knew my own plans, I began to learn about His will. From a barren heart, I gradually became someone who could pray for others, love unconditionally, and forgive sincerely. Not because I am good, but because I surrendered, and He came in. If you ask me, do you want to go back to the way you were? I would say no. Because if I had to choose between having everything back but not having God, or losing everything but having Him, I would choose to lose everything, because I haven't really lost anything if I have Him. The Bible says this, and now I understand it more deeply than ever before. I consider everything as lost because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish, so that I may gain Christ. Philippians 3:8. I lost everything, but I gained Him, and that is the greatest gain of my life. My dear friend, if you are losing, if you are lost, if you are desperate, I cannot promise that God will give you back everything you want, but I believe he will give you himself. And when you have him, you will know that you have not truly lost anything. My journey does not end here. It has only just begun with the one I found among the ashes. And now I know, no matter what else I lose in the future, he is still there. I used to think losing everything was the end, but through this journey I realized losing everything was the beginning of truly meeting God. Not when everything was stable, not amid the glory, but in the midst of brokenness, in the depths of despair, I saw him clearly. He did not come with a full wallet, a new house, or a high title. He came in a broken heart that surrendered. And when I had nothing left to hold on to, he gave himself to me. And that was the greatest gift. I no longer live to collect things that can be lost. I live to know God, to love him, and to tell anyone who is hurting. You are not alone. Even if you lose everything, he is still there, and he is waiting for you with arms that will never close. Thank you for listening to my journey. If this story touches you, please share it. Who knows, it may be how God enters someone's life, just as he entered mine. Don't forget to subscribe to the Witnesses of Faith channel to continue following real testimonies about a living and active God. See you in the next video. May God be with you in the midst of what you've lost and lead you to what you'll never lose, his eternal love.